Welcome to Acton in Focus, the very first episode for the year 2026. I'm Vivian Kobusingye Birchall, your host, and I have three special guests, long-term residents of the town of Acton, and I'll go right from the person sitting right next to me. Kindly introduce yourselves and tell us how long you have been in this town, and we'll start there.
Okay, so I'm Greg Jarboe. And I got to town in 1977 as the editor of the Acton Minutemen, back when the town had two weekly newspapers. But we didn't move here until 1978. So I guess I've been here for a long time. And over that period, I spent a stint on the select board from 1980 to 83. And I'm currently on the finance committee and writing for Acton Exchange.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm Sahana Purohit. Hi, Vivian.
Hi.
And it's nice to be on your first episode for the year. We have been in Acton for nearly 2 decades now, 20 years ago. Moved in 2006, early 2006. Since I've moved here, I've been, my background is totally different. I was a software engineer by profession. Life happened. I was home, and my first involvement with the town was with Conan School, where the then principal asked me to be on the superintendent's committee, which talked only about budgets. And after that, I decided to join Acton 2020, a planning board committee. And since then, I've just taken off on various boards and committees, including the League of Women Voters, the Finance Committee, and now I'm the chair of the Acton Democratic Town Committee, as well as a commissioner on Acton Housing Authority.
Very busy.
I'll see Sahana's 20 years and raise that to 40 years.
Wow.
We moved to Acton like a lot of people, so that at one point we would have children in the schools, and that took a while, but eventually we did have 2 children go through the school system, matriculating in 2015 and 2018. And while my children were in the schools, I did serve on the school committee, but then after my son graduated, I went ahead and did another term on the school committee as part of my service to the town. Currently, I'm serving the town on the Acton Water District Finance Committee.
Excellent. And the reason I requested you to share some of how long you've been here is to provide a perspective to our viewers that you guys have seen a lot of our town's development and evolvement over the years. And it's such an honor to have you here just to talk about things you're interested in, things you've been a part of, and ways that you're trying to make our town even better than you found it. So with that, I wanted to start with Greg. What are some of over these years, what are some of the things that have stood out for you with the town of Acton in terms of, first of all, the best practices as a town, and things that have stood out in terms of growth for the town?
Well, there are a number of best practices that we've seen over the years. The most interesting one, and I don't know that everyone is aware of this, is we have a very, very high turnout in elections. So relative to other communities in the state, we're not always the number one in terms of percentage turnout, but we have, we're generally at the top. So we have a very active community, a very involved community, and one of the things that translates into is that local politics is really a hot topic. So that's one of the good things. Now, that can also then, that comes with a mixed blessing. So one of the reasons why I ended up running for the select board in 1980, now that's a long time ago, was that one of our biggest taxpayers and biggest businesses in town was a company called W.R. Grace. And they had contaminated 2 of our 5 wells, so 40% of our drinking water went offline because of one of our big businesses in town. And because citizens here are so active, there was a group created called ACES, the Acton Citizens for Environmental Safety, who started running candidates for the select board. And they ran one fellow named Hayden Duggan in '79. He got elected. They ran me in 1980. I got elected. And then they ran Pam Reeser in '81, and she got elected. And suddenly the majority of the select board had been elected on an environmental slate of issues. And we ended up suing W.R. Grace and getting the 30-year cleanup of the aquifer as a result. So that citizen activism can be really powerful when it's harnessed.
Very, very interesting history, because I didn't know about your history with W.R. Grace. And
When I was chair of the select board, and this would have been in the fall of '82, I got a phone call in the middle of the night from the fire chief who said, there's a styrene leak on the W.R. Grace plant property, and if a spark occurs, or if it ignites, there's going to be a big hole in South Acton. Should we evacuate citizens nearby? And are you kidding? Of course. And he said, well, what about West Concord? Because that's another jurisdiction. I said, are you kidding? I said, I'll deal with whatever political fallout there is, tomorrow. But yeah, you start knocking on doors in South Acton, you start knocking on doors in West Concord. If there's a possibility of a catastrophic event, we need to react. We need to react now. So it taught me that, yeah, town government sometimes sounds boring and sleepy, and town meeting's coming up again. Do you know how hard it is to get a babysitter? But the net is the people who are there often are called upon to deal with extraordinary emergencies, and you want to have good people in place.
And we're going to get back to that later, a little later, to talk about the interaction between the town staff and the community. But before that, same question to you, Sahana.
So, I don't have as much experience as what Greg said. That
You're not
was
as old.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I would actually stress on that, yes. So it was interesting to hear your experiences. I would say that, since I started about volunteering in town, probably at the time around 2008, 2009, when I really got into town side of things, joining Acton 2020, being an immigrant and not knowing much about any of the town, how town government works or the state government works. So it was interesting learning process. One thing that I did see in the town of Acton, people were very welcoming. For me to be on Acton 2020 as an Indian, as an immigrant, they were so willing to teach me, and some of the public outreach that we did, people were really, really kind and nice towards me. So that kind of motivated me to continue volunteering my time in the town. It's the community involvement in the town that is key to the progress in the town. Our neighbors, like Greg mentioned, the turnout in the elections, which was news to me that we are one of the highest. The town meeting, though we don't garner too many people getting into the town meeting, but certain town meetings did get a lot of people in, especially I think during the marijuana time and the Kelly's Corner, some of the important town meetings, there was a big crowd that turned up, the twin schools. So yeah, it's the community involvement.
Excellent. Over to you, same question.
I'll share both, something that hasn't changed in 40 years, as well as some things that have changed. So from the standpoint of what hasn't changed in Acton the entire time that I've been here, it's always been a highly educated community. And as Greg and Sahana said, with very actively involved people. And I've often cautioned people who are speaking to Acton audiences to be mindful, because in the audience there is undoubtedly somebody who knows more about what you're speaking about than you do.
Right.
Coming along with that, I think unsurprisingly to many, is that Acton is also a wee bit competitive. And this really came home to me when my daughter, who was in drama, came back and explained, why, Proscenium Circus was so focused on winning the state award. And it's like, Dad, why would you think that we're drama kids not as competitive as all those kids playing sports? It's the same kids. So I think that those are two things that haven't changed. We can argue with regard to both of those about the pluses and minuses, but they're features of the community. But in terms of things that really have changed, when we first moved to Acton, not so long after that, the high school graduating class was just over 200 students. When my daughter graduated, the high school graduating class was 500 students. And of course, for people who have been following AB Forward, now we know that, we're back the other way. So the composition of the community, which impacts everything about the life of the community, has changed substantially. Not really quickly, but it changes. And when those changes occur, the community needs to react.
Well, first of all, when I hear all your histories and backgrounds, I feel like such a newbie, even though I've been here since 2016.
That's 10 years.
But I feel like such a newbie. But some of the recurring themes that I've heard from your experiences was the activism of the community, the competitiveness, and the engagement, and also the interaction with the town or schools. So with that background, and I'll start with John. The three of you are here together because there is a project that brought you together. I know that you've done other things before, but for the purposes of this interview, there is a project that has brought you together. So, John, starting with you, what is that project?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. Every project needs a prime mover, and in this case, that's Greg. So
Okay.
Greg had, as journalists sometimes do, a very embryonic, ill-formed idea about having a podcast. But the good part about this was he knew he couldn't do it himself. And so he, went through a very exhaustive and diligent search. And having concluded that, he recruited Sahana and myself to say, wouldn't you join me on this adventure? For people who know me, I'm a little bit about, I would like to pick my own adventure. And so when Greg started to kick around ideas, directions we could go, I said, I think one of the things that would be a great place to start is the Acton Microburst for 2023. And the reason is that it engaged the whole community. So I thought we could do something good around that.
And wait, I said, Acton Microburst, what's that? Because I was out of town. I was on Cape Cod, and it was my idea, and
yeah, he stole that. He stole the thunder.
No. And as I started listening, he said, the entire town had to deal with this crisis, and I'm going, oh, I remember crises. Okay, this was big. So my problem was, I got here after the recovery had already started. I came home from the Cape and discovered that there was a big story I'd missed. Now, part of the reason we missed the big story is we no longer have two weekly newspapers in town. We no longer have the Lowell Sun and the Middlesex News fighting for coverage over the town like they did 45 years ago. We're in a situation these days where a lot of people miss the big story. And this was even in September of 2023, before the Acton Exchange was actually launched. So in that sort of the dark ages, where we had no news, we were a news desert, suddenly there was this mega event, and I found it fascinating to learn about it. And John was here, and Sahana was here, and they could fill in the richness of the story.
But at a high level,
I'll take it on from here.
Before you go on in terms of the microburst, I have to say that he's just pointed out that there was a vacuum, a news vacuum, which is sad because ActonTV was here, and I'm wondering why the community didn't utilize Acton TV's presence to share that information. But that's a story that, you know, those are things we can explore going forward in terms of how can we use the resources available to us in our community like Acton TV to share this information broadly. But I just wanted to pitch that in, that we are always available to tell those stories to anyone who has a story out there.
Well, and it turns out, as part of our retelling of a story, we actually went to Acton TV footage and we were able to pull out interviews. Actually, they're not interviews. It was your coverage of the Acton Select Board meeting that actually began framing our discussion. We heard from Jim Snyder Grant, who was the chair of the Select Board at that time, talking on a Monday night after the microburst had hit on Friday, you know, let's talk about that storm.
Right.
And then we heard from the town manager, and we heard from Dean Charter, and I think we're framing what we're doing with a little historic footage from Acton TV.
Yeah, we'll look forward to talking about the structure of how this has gone on. But just again, for the benefit of everyone out there in the community, what was this microburst? Who would like to take?
So I just wanted to go back to the previous question
Okay.
and build on what John said.
Okay.
You know, it was Greg's idea, and the way he approached it, I said, hey, I have never done something like this before, so can I be a part of this? Without realizing what I was getting into. Well, I'm here today with these two great guys, so just wanted to put that out here. And like Greg said, you know, he was not here. John and I, we were both very much in Acton, at least I was. I was, when it all happened, I was at West Acton, at Acton Coffee House, and I was at a meeting with Bob Ferreira and Dan Senna. So we are sitting, I'm with my computer, and suddenly I look out the window and I go, oh my God, that is a huge thunderstorm, lightning, thunder. And my first thought was, I need to go home because my dog was alone and he would be scared. I know these guys have heard the story many, many times. So I said, okay, I need to go, and I kind of wrapped up and rushed to the car, and we already saw a tree fallen down on 111. I reached Main Street and near the town hall, the traffic had stopped. Basically stopped. I couldn't go anywhere. We were just crawling or basically not going anywhere. The police were already, this was right in front of town hall. They were diverting the traffic through the church parking lot. Believe it or not, it took me 2 hours to get back home. A little over 2 hours. And there was no electricity. And this was in North Acton, where I live. So by the time I got there, lots of trees down on Carlisle Road, but it was a miracle that I could get my car to the house. But I also tried to call the others in West Acton, and they had not lost power. It was right in the center of town that all of this happened.
All right.
So it was interesting.
So Sahana and Greg's story, you know, perfectly frames, you know, one of the things we'd like to try and reveal in the context of the discussion of the microburst. And that is, there was something that's very important that happened that one person was strongly impacted by and another person was completely unaware of. And if you look at the operations of the town, there are some people in the town that you do see. You see the town manager out and about, and you might interact with a police officer on a detail or some other things. But there are many people in the town doing important jobs that you don't see. And what the microburst did was it brought all of those people to work at the same time, working together. So we hope that when people look at this historical information, what they'll see is what it takes actually to mount a coordinated response. And you know, both appreciate, you know, the fact that in any real emergency, there are some things that work for you and there are some things that work against you that you can't possibly anticipate before it happens.
Thank you for that history. I'll ask the important question. What was the microburst?
The natural phenomenon.
So anybody want to take a shot at it so that we can understand, so our viewers can understand?
Let me take a cut, and then if you don't like my cut, then we have alternative
Because
possibilities.
we often debate each other. We don't always.
Yeah, we
So,
don't agree.
So the weather forecast, for that Friday, September 8th, 2023, was for maybe some thunderstorms in the afternoon, but nothing particularly unusual. Nobody would have been, planning around that. Everybody that we talked to was just, I'm doing my usual thing, and I know there might be some rain, so maybe I'll work a little bit to avoid that part of the day. But what actually happened was, by around 2 o'clock, all of a sudden the weather maps had really, really deteriorated. It looked bad. And in particular, the fire chief noticed that there's going to be a problem and started thinking, I need to let the people up in NARA know what's going on.
Why were the people in NARA? You got to fill in the blank
So
there.
most of the town employees that day were at NARA Park for Employee Recognition Day, which they do every fall. So it just happened, that's where the town employees were as the microburst was moving in. And so then during the time frame that the microburst is moving in, people are mostly leaving NARA trying to get home or wherever they would normally be going. And what happens through that period of time is people start to get calls. It's like, no, all you people at DPW, you're not going home. You're going back to DPW. We need everybody back and working to help get our roads clear. And likewise, over at the schools, what was happening is Jim Marcotte was looking out the window, looking at the weather, and it's like, oh, this is not good, when he saw a tree fall on a school bus. And he's like, so what should we do about dismissal? So decisions had to be made about how should we manage the dismissal from school. And then police and fire, what's happening is police are like, oh, there's a ton of stuff going on. We're going to hold first shift. So we can double up our manpower as we try and respond to this. They did the same thing in dispatch, but there are lots of individual stories, like Sahana's story. Normally I could drive home in a few minutes, but now it's going to take me an hour to get from, or 2 hours to get from A to B. And so that's everything that's going on. And then the microburst, there were two things about it that are very important in terms of the response. One is it didn't really last that long. It's really 30 minutes of this intense wind and rain, which creates a ton of damage. 6,000 people have lost power. 14 trees are down on houses. It's really, really bad. But then it's over. So now the next phase is we need to figure out what's happened and start fixing things. And I think the other thing that was true in the response to the microburst that's very important is we call it the Acton microburst, not just because we're at Acton and ActonTV, because it really hit Acton.
Yeah,
it didn't hit Concord, it didn't hit Maynard, it hit Acton. And that was very consequential for the response, because normally, when there's storms of this type, Eversource would be responding to, well, what does Concord need, and what does Maynard need, and what does Sudbury need? And in this case, every Eversource truck was headed straight to Acton. And that helped a lot in the response to the microburst. So is that a good overview, or do you want some more?
That's perfect.
That's great.
That's perfect. I just do want to stress what he said. The natural phenomenon that happened right over Acton, nowhere else. And mainly center of town, North Acton, and nowhere else. And the damage was so severe, and it's amazing.
You guys are here to discuss an environmental a phenomenon that happened and the response as a result. But there is more to it. Why is it important for you to use this microburst as a foundation for the stories you're telling or you're going to tell in the projects that you're doing? And maybe I forgot to ask, what is the project that you're trying to create here at ActonTV?
Well, I was at least sort of kind of able to name the project because I started it off, but my original name was Your Tax Dollars at Work. And my colleagues said, your tax dollars, that sounds like somebody else's. It's our tax dollars at work. And it's like, oh yeah, fine, we'll make that edit. But what we are taking a hard look at is if you look at anybody's budget, whether it's the town budget, the school budget, the things that we vote on at town meeting, about 75% of any of those budgets is people. And that's not just their salaries, but also their benefits and their pensions and related costs. So what we're really talking about when we talk about our tax dollars at work is who are the people that are employed by the town or the schools, and what do they do? Now, you can talk about their normal day, and John starts off a lot of his interviews with, tell me about what a normal day looks like on a Friday.
Good question.
It's a great question, because then it's like, well, then the microburst was not a normal day.
Right.
And we then go really quickly to what makes Acton the unique community that it is, because one of the things that we learned in this interview series is that interdepartmental communication was the hidden glue. Everybody was talking to colleagues in different departments, because the response was, as I think several people said, all hands on deck.
And add to that, how well the community came together, helping neighbors, helping each other. So that was also a very big key part of getting through this disaster.
And did you want to add anything?
Well, I think they've really said it. I think what the takeaway was, this is a terrible event. Nobody wants this to happen. And when we interview people, you hear them say, yeah, hopefully we don't see anything like this. But it was a wonderful response. It was a wonderful response by the town and the town employees, and it was a wonderful response by the citizens. Are there things that could be better? Of course there are, and we asked people about those too.
And we got thoughtful answers, because one of the interesting things that I think this town does is it does really good analysis of sort of the after action report. It's like, okay, that was good but not perfect, and so what do we do? And again, going back to our citizen activism, we've interviewed a few citizens who said, here's a few things they could have done differently, and we would have liked. But we also have a lot of town employees who are also thinking about, okay, this could have gone a little better. What would I do differently?
As somebody who worked with the town before coming to ActonTV, there is so much that I saw internally that the rest of the community outside has no idea about. Even especially when it worked during COVID. I left around COVID time, but the amount of effort that staff put in to continue doing the work amidst a scary disease or a scary health, public health environment was humbling. And so what you're doing, trying to tell the stories behind the scenes and how the tax dollar is at work, is commendable, and it's much needed. So I hope that the community watches these videos and learns about the work and the people behind the scenes that do all the amazing work. But I want to give the opportunity to you all, if there's anything that you'd like to share at this point as we wrap up about the project that you're doing, that we have anything we haven't talked about.
Well, we're not done editing yet. The process came together and took more time than I think I optimistically anticipated.
Me too.
We started doing interviews in early September. And then we kept doing interviews. And I think we have our last interview coming up later this week. And then we've got to finish editing. And so
Right.
this is a work in progress.
That's okay.
And we've learned some things just by watching the interviews that we completed to say, oh, I wasn't expecting that. I think we're going to have to change this next episode. So, like town meeting,
Yep,
this was
I
a
was
learning
thinking about
process.
that. I was
Yeah.
thinking about
This was a learning process, but hopefully we're close to being done.
Yeah.
I think everybody who's worked on projects knows, this arc of a project. There's enthusiasm at the beginning. People think, this isn't going to cost that much. This won't take that long to do. And then you start to do the real project. And as my son reminded me, if you look at YouTube videos and talk to people about where the time went in, the editing is like 10 times the actual content acquisition. And you obviously, Vivian, know that very well from your time editing all of these these videos. I think that that message carries over into all of these interactions with the town. Everybody wishes things could go faster. I should just be able to snap my finger and boom, it would be done. Surely, Sahana, Greg, and I would be thrilled if we could just snap our finger and boom, well, here's the final product. That's not life. That's not the world we live in. And so when people engage with the town, you need to bring that, dose of realism that says, yeah, this is going to take longer than I would like. It might cost more money than I would like. But just like this, microburst episode, that if you stay with it, the journey will have been sort of a fun one, and something worthwhile will come out at the end.
Excellent. The dose of reality. It's fun to start a project, but then you realize along the way, interviewing people is an art, it's a skill. So we kind of left it to John to do the interviews.
Excellent.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and one of the things I guess I was hoping to get is just the vision of this. What is your vision in terms of how it could be received?
Well, there was an original vision, but I will tell you that it's now become a community's version of the vision.
Okay.
Because we knew the questions we thought we wanted to ask ahead of time. And after interviewing a dozen different people, their vision comes through. And so this is, it's basically the final product is a community vision. It's not a solitary, oh yeah, I had this idea. It reminds me of, I don't know if you know about circle stories.
Yes,
Okay.
a bit.
Well, I used to tell them to my kids around a campfire. It's like I would start the story and then say, okay, Sahana, you got to pick it up from here. And all right, John, now you've got to pick it up from there. That's the community vision that we have here. We've got a lot of people who are playing interesting roles, not only as town employees, but even a couple of the citizens in the community, all participating in creating the circle story.
We can't go back in time to know exactly, what that moment was when Greg said, oh, I want to do this. But for people who don't know Greg lives for engagement. There's no point in writing something or doing something if you don't have engagement. So I think at the root of all of this, we can come back to that word community and Greg's view of, I want to engage the community and say this is all about community engagement.
I really want to thank you all for the service you're providing the town, or you've been providing the town over the years. We don't take that for granted. It's your time, effort, resources, name it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you also for being, actually before I say thank you for being guests on my show, but is there one thing you'd like to leave our viewers, each of you, as we wrap this up?
I just want to say thank you, Vivian, because you have consistently been out trying to provide deeper insights into the community. I saw you at the Bedrock Well opening at the Acton Water District. I saw Mark actually when he was out at Discover STEM Fest. And so this work that's going on at ActonTV really does enrich the community, and I thank you all for it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vivian. And also thanks to Mark. He's been a big part of our project too, helping us get organized with the editing, teaching us how to edit. So thanks to both of you. And just be involved. It's all about the community. It's all about neighbors.
Thank you.
And I guess all I want to do is sort of in advance beg a little, when the community finally watches our first 5 episodes, which is what we are currently working on, please be charitable. I mean, this was a volunteer effort. None of us got paid to do it.
And we don't have the experience, at least I don't.
So it's a work in progress, but I'm sure the feedback will help us do better in the future.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being my guest, my first guest of the year on Acton in Focus.
Hey.
And we look forward to bringing you back This is just the start of many conversations about your engagement with different projects in the town. So thank you. And to our viewers, I hope you've learned a little something about the project that they're doing, about the historical engagements with the town, if that's a thing. And I hope you'll engage with their projects as they share them with the public. But for now, thank you for watching. Till next time.